Condo owners are stunned by a $70,000 unexpected bill that they have to pay for their condo. This is called a special assessment. I'm going to go through this story so that you as a condo owner understand how this may impact you. I'm going to talk about insurance policies for that you can get to cover yourself, and also how some of the stuff may play out in the future if you do not pay your special assessment. So make sure you stay tuned. Now, if you want to make a move in the condo market in the future and you want to work with professionals who understand things like this and more in-depth knowledge about the condo market that most people don't understand, you can do so by booking a call with me. Use the link that's on the screen right here. It's www.chatwithzen.com, or the link's in the description below. Simply click on a date and a time that works best for you. And then when you see the prop, fill in your name, email, mobile phone number, and the question you have for me, and then we'll chat then. Good day, everybody. Welcome back to Prime Properties TO. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Zhen, and I run and operate a RE/MAX in the Greater Toronto area where we help a lot of clients buy, sell, and invest in real estate. And if you're enjoying the content we're putting out there, do me a favor and like and subscribe. So the article we'll be reviewing today is no one has $70,000 lying around for a condo special assessment. So for anyone who doesn't know what a special assessment is, it's basically the condo board, who is kind of like the board of directors for that specific condo. Because when you buy into a condo, you don't actually like own the entire condo, you own your proportionate share of it, and there's a board that manages it, right? So then the board, who's responsible for managing the integrity and the structural integrity and everything else with finance, et cetera, of the condo, they're like, hey, we need to make this repair, and they're making all the owners pay a certain amount so they can make this repair because they don't have the funds to cover it. That's essentially kind of what's happening right now, right? So in this article, it talks from like owner's perspective, saying this gentleman bought out the complex at 869 Wilson Avenue 5 years ago, and all of a sudden now he's finding out from property management that the condo board, meaning him as one of the owners of the condo, are saying, hey, look, we have to borrow $7 million to do a repair, or we each pay $70,000 each. So that's a lot of money. And generally, like what happens here, so you guys understand, is this. I think this owner and a lot of the owners got caught off guard because they don't force that decision. They usually goes to a vote. And this is why a lot of people should attend the AGMs or annual general meetings so that they know what's going on, right? So they will generally put this to the vote to see which direction they want to go down. And there's pros and cons to both. Because if you borrow a $7 million loan, it means that your maintenance fees are going to go up because you have to service that loan on interest on top of that, plus pay it off over time. And that makes the maintenance fee much higher. And when the maintenance fee is a little bit out of whack, the building's value goes down. So the other side of this, a special assessment, is that, hey, everyone just coughs up the money right now so that it doesn't jack up the maintenance fee and the properties maintain their value and don't have an out of whack maintenance fee. Because then who looks at a maintenance fee and they look at the per square footage in terms of what they pay, they're like, oh, this is out of whack, we have a problem. So depending on kind of like each person and their financial situation, they can choose or decide to vote which one they want. However, generally majority wins in democracy, right? Everyone is essentially going to be voting in their best interest, whether they have the $70,000 or they don't, and whether they maintain the value of the property or, they want to, but they can't afford to do so. So from a condo owner's perspective, they're really just going to be voting for their own best interest, as usual with most voting, which means that if you have the funds for the $70,000, you'll vote for the special assessment to maintain that condo's value because you may get some of that back when you do sell it, or if you do sell it. The offside is if you don't have that money, you're going to vote to build it through the maintenance costs, essentially borrow against it so that you don't owe so much money. The problem with having the special assessment levied is that if you as an owner do not have that $70,000 to pay back, they can power of sale your property. Yeah, they can. Because you don't own the property outright, right? So that the condo board, if you don't pay this amount, it becomes like an outstanding amount that you as a condo owner owe, they can force you to sell that property. Yes, they can actually do this for maintenance fee too, right? And that's kind of saying like there's a big difference between freehold properties and condo. And generally, the hierarchy of how stuff gets paid out will be the taxes first if you get power of sold. And then you have to pay out the special assessment and all the other stuff that comes along with it, the cost of selling. And then if there's any equity remaining, that goes back to your pocket. Now, we've had a lot of properties where we knew about special assessments that were coming or they were levied. And generally, I would say if you know it's coming, especially if it's a large one, just try to get out. because once a special assessment has been assessed, it really has a hard time for that condo to kind of upkeep its reputation because word gets out, right? So we've had past condos where we've sold where we knew a condo assessment was coming, and then we try to get out before everybody else. Because if you really think through kind of the game theory of it all, is that once people realize that, hey, I have to pay this certain amount and I can't afford it, and they have to sell the home, or they're saying, hey, I don't want to deal with this, it becomes a rush to the door, and there's going to be a lot of properties for sale in that condo, and there's a lot of inventory. Then from a market perspective, there's too many sellers, and then there are buyers for that condo. And when we look at a building where there's too many units, we're like, what's going on over here? And we kind of assess to see what's going on. So see what I mean? Like, you want to get ahead of a special assessment if it's going to be like a catastrophic one. Now, when you're buying a condo, or there's a very common clause I'll put over here that basically says the seller is responsible for any special assessments leading up to the closing date. And that's very normal to put in there in case something happens to protect you. But there's a weird loophole-ish kind of thing where you can choose to disclose or not disclose whether you know about a potential pending special assessment. Because a special assessment needs to be levied, meaning that the people of the condo board, after an AGM, they vote for it. But if they haven't voted for it yet and it hasn't been levied, but you know the repairs need to be done, that's kind of a gray area on whether you need to disclose that or not, right? And that's kind of why a lot of people, once they hear of the special assessment, they're like, boom, list, right? Depending obviously on the size of it. So those are things you kind of have to understand. Also, another thing you should probably understand is when you buy a condo, there's generally a condition to review the status certificate, or it's given to you so you can review in advance with the lawyer. And the main things you really want to look out for is the reserve fund, which is kind of like the emergency fund for how much money there is to cover any major repairs to like roof, garage, curtain walls, anything that requires a ton of money, right? And you also want to look at the insurance policy to see what it covers and what the deductible is, because they could be very large or they could be very small. And then the other thing is you want to look at how much of your condo fees goes into that reserve fund, because some condos like to keep the maintenance fee low, but the reserve fund doesn't get built up, right? So like, I don't know what the magic number is, right? But I've read a lot of status certificates myself personally, and just looking at the reserve fund and just looking at the dollar amount that's in the emergency reserve fund relative to the amount of units, I have a rough idea of whether it's healthy or not. So in the case of this one, it had 400,000 for like 100 units, which is not great, but it's not like absolutely horrendous, right? But like some really strong condo buildings with like 400 units generally would have like a few $1 million in there, right? So that's just give you a rough ballpark of like what to look for. But here's kind of all the kicker to all of this. Your lawyer may not understand all of this. They may not. And when they look at the financial statements, and even if your lawyer looks at it, they may not understand, how much it costs to run a pool, how much, running concierge services cost. So these are all things that like you really have to understand from a property manager's perspective to actually read some of this. And you're not really the most qualified person to understand this, nor is your lawyer. So these are kind of common things you have to understand. That's why getting a good lawyer is, worth the money, because it's like a spread of a few $100. So one of the things I was going through this, I was like, well, it's a 7-year-old building. Is it past 7 years or before 7 years? Because Tarion technically covers structural kind of deficits, for anything that's under 7 years. And this is kind of me pulling it up for you. So you can see here that 7-home major structural deficit, or MSD warranty. And what's included is kind of soil movement, major cracks in basement walls, chemical failures, and collapse. Now what's not covered is drain services, dampness not arising from failure or load-bearing portion of the building, and damage to finishes. So I don't know what the garage repair is, not an engineer, I have no idea. So this is kind of something that you guys have to understand and see if it's actually covered. But the fact that, a special assessment's being levied on tells me that this is not kind of covering that. So that's the unfortunate thing. And if you ever worked with Tarion, they're more builder friendly, and they're also funded by the builders, right? So it's not great. Let's just put it that way, okay? I've gone through a couple of them. It's not great. It's like, trying to pull teeth to get anything done and fixed, let alone like in a timely manner. So I'll just leave it at that. Now, if you do kind of want to understand whether a builder is good or not, because I think a lot of people are buying condos like, oh, who's this builder? Who's this builder? And I'm not going to put any names so I don't get any lawyer letters. But if you really want to do a quick search, there's something called the HCRA, and you can just Google up. I'll put a video showing you how to look it up, but you can pull up the builder and see if they have any kind of Tarion claims, right? So when I quickly pull this one up, you can see most builders have it as an umbrella corporation. Usually that corporation dissolves once they sell off all the units and the building's registered and they move the funds elsewhere, right? Again, legal protection. But when I kind of look here, this particular building, there's already 4 chargeable offenses, right? So not great, but they all kind of happened in the last little bit of it. So if you want to kind of look through the building that you're buying, whether the builder is good, you can just follow that little video I put up there to kind of dig into the builders. And this is why like a big builder and its reputation is important. Because if you get into the really, really large big boy builders, they usually even have their own property management like Tridel and Menkes, where they're very incentivized to keep the building in proper shape. And they hand it off to one of their kind of subsidiary kind of companies for property management because it maintains the building, it maintains the reputation, it keeps the cost low so they can sell more product in the future. So it's like vertically integrated, and a lot of big builders have that. So you want to look out for things like that. Whereas a lot of smaller builders, they definitely don't have that. They want to basically close off their properties, get their money, and move on to the next one, right? I'm not saying this is just the case in this one. I'm just saying like generally speaking, right? So how do you protect yourself from, these special assessments? Because they could essentially happen with like, any condo. By having a good builder and a good reputation of them and like call it kind of new-ish, right? You are lowering the possibility of a special assessment, but poo-poo can happen, right? So the insurance products you want to look for are basically special assessment coverage, and there's also something called loss assessment coverage. I can tell you for a fact, both of them you can get at Allstate and Square One. No affiliation whatsoever. It's just that has come up in the past before, and someone has asked me about this since this article came out. So what I will say is that there's a difference between the two. A loss assessment is kind of like an act of God, right? And usually you'll have that as a condo insurance to protect you from any kind of like levies from these act of God things that insurance doesn't cover, right? To an extent. The special assessment's a little bit different in a sense that it's kind of like a repair or something that is a deficit that needs to be repaired, but it hasn't broken yet, If you don't make these repairs, then you're going to have a catastrophic thing, right? So those are 2 separate products. You should ask your insurance companies if they have those coverage. They're usually like a premium on top of it, like somewhere to $40-$50, give or take, per year. So it's kind of like nominal. Hopefully this gives you a better understanding of some of the inner workings of how some of these special assessments and condos work out. Yes, 100% there's risk with buying a condo, but I think this special assessment of $70,000 is much higher than most I have seen. I've seen stuff anywhere between like $5,000, $15,000, and $20,000, but 70 is pretty big. And I would probably say it's because there were very little units there, and maybe their fix is really, really large. I don't know because they haven't disclosed what's going on. But this is just to give you an idea of how to protect yourself, the insurances you can get, generally what may or may not happen if you get a special assessment, and also like how to find out the reputation of that builder. So if you're looking to make a move in the real estate market, especially if you're trying to buy a condo and you want in-depth knowledge like this so someone can protect you and your best interests, you can do so by booking a call with me. Use the link that's on the screen. It's right here, www.chatwithzen.com. Until next time, your move, your future. See ya! Now that you're done watching this one, how about this one or this one? You know what? Just watch them both.